Oh, welcome everyone to Myth Informed with your hosts, Brian and Dimitri. Today with us, actor, writer, and director Travis Wester, best known for his appearances on Beverly Hills 90210, Supernatural, and one of my all-time personal favorites as Jamie in EuroTrip, along with a whole host of other roles, of course. Travis refers to himself as a liberalist, progressive, apostate, and defender of Western values, which I really hope is a creative play on words. Otherwise, I'll be very disappointed. He loves to engage in political discourse, and we are excited to be speaking with him today. Welcome, Travis.
Did we lose him? Travis, are you there?
Good to be here.
Yes. Hello.
Good to be here in cyberspace, talking to you over this miracle of technology that we share.
That is awesome. Yes, we're definitely doing that. And it's cool. You know, I wanted to know, I used to watch Bev Niner back in the day.
I've never heard it called that. I love that.
No one knows that joke, Brian. You need to explain this.
Beverly Hills Niner, Bev Niner for short. If you were like in the early 90s, like I was, and part of the cool kids, that's what you called it.
This is how we weed out our Gen Xer crowd who still is watching and who is tuned out.
I love my Bev Niner. You know, like it was good. Like, was Dylan as cool as I thought he was, though? That's my question. That's my first question. But you know, how was he?
Oh.
Well, Beverly Hills 90210. I talk about it. I say that it was kind of like being on the cover of People magazine, but people were actually moving. It was outstanding. It was incredible. Jason Priestley taught me how to play lacrosse. Wow. One of my favorite stories from the set. I don't know how much. By the way, how long are we going to go here?
Oh, it doesn't matter until one of us gets bored.
until we all vomit. We're all vomiting like it's a Family Guy sketch. Cool. So one of my favorite stories that's ever happened to me is, and I had a problem with one of the lines, and the line was something along the lines of like it was like a writer trying to sound like a cool, and so my character, and nobody saying like, okay, we're gonna go here and we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that and it's gonna be fine, it's gonna be great. My response to that is basically to say like, okay, cool, like, all right, fine, sure, great, yes, excellent, sounds good, something like that. Instead, the written line was razor. So in response to someone being like, "Oh, okay, we're gonna get a bunch of beers and we're gonna go to a party or something," I turn and I go, razor. I call over. So Jason Priestley was directing that episode. Jason Priestley, directed a bunch of the episodes, and so I was sitting there, kind of like looking around, like, what is going on here? And Jason Priestley walks over and he goes, "Trav, you got a problem?" And I said, "Oh, Jason, that's fine. It's fine. It's fine." He goes, "No, I can tell. There's something going on here. What's up?" This line says razor. And he's like, "Yeah, right." And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, razor, just say like, yeah, cool instead." And his response was, that's a good question. Hang on a second. And he takes out his phone. It's a big phone because it was in the 90s. So he takes out his phone and he flips it down because that's what he did. And he boop, 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 boop. Hey, yeah, Cheryl, it's Jason. I'm on set. Yeah, let me talk to Uncle A. Yeah, thanks. Uncle A. Now, if you know anything about television, you might know who he's talking about. He's talking about Aaron Spelling, who was the executive producer at that time and was basically the godfather of television from about 1980 to about 2000, right? And so he gets on the phone he's like, "Hey, yeah, Aaron, what's going on? It's Jason. Yeah, I'm on the set with one of your actors and he doesn't like his line."
Ow! Oh man, you're like, throw me under the bus.
Literally what he said. Yeah, literally what he said. And then the conversation was really quick. He just goes, "Yeah, oh, it's on page bub. It's razor. Yeah, he wants to change it to yeah, cool." Okay, great. All right, thanks, Aaron. I'll tell him. Thanks, bye. Change is good. Let's do it. Which is fine, but I think I was maybe 17 years old at the time, and my pulse was racing. I was literally fired. but Jason Priestley came through. He hooked it up, and I will always be a huge Jason Priestley fan for exactly that reason. So that's like my big 90210 story. But other than that, it was a great experience. Tiffany Amber Thiessen is amazing in person. I mean, she's amazing on screen, but she's amazing in person also. And yeah, so there you go.
So for the fans of Bev Niner, and I'm just gonna call it that, Beverly Hills 90210, Bev Niner, like which character do you play?
Austin Sanders, if memory serves. And the reason I remember that is because my brother's name is Austin, so I thought it was weird. But yeah, it's Austin Sanders, and it was actually Aaron Spelling's kid was playing my brother, so we got treated pretty well.
Yeah, yeah. Steve Sanders, he was a cool guy. I liked him.
So we
no. Yeah, okay, so my younger brother. Fuck, I did not know I was going to be talking. Anyway, it was Aaron Spelling's youngest son was playing my actual brother.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I mean, it does. Listen,
I just thought it was a really cool show. Everyone watched it. If you're my age.
He's the 90210 fan. I'm more of the, I already mentioned this in the intro, the EuroTrip fan. So that was how it was, you know, when our producer, he's like, oh yeah, he's like, he was in this movie, you may have heard of it. And I'm like, well, fuck yeah, I've heard of it. This was like, A, it was the year that I graduated high school, and B, it was for my brother and I, it was just the funniest thing that come out since, I don't know, There's Something About Mary. I mean, it was just, for me, it was an absolute hilarious, and people that haven't seen it go and, you know, give Travis some more royalties.
Definitely watch it. It was actually really good. It was actually really good. Unfortunately, it came out at a time where I think people were kind of sick of the genre, the teen, you know, the raunchy. I think that genre was kind of reaching its end, but the script I thought was really, really good.
No, the whole thing is it was paced very well, and the jokes were actually funny. Plus, all of you, I don't know how they picked the subset of characters that they did, but you guys just meshed very well. You know how you pick a type A personality, B, or if you know the DISC assessment, you guys were a different letter of the DISC assessment, and, you know, is casting you as like the nerdy. I mean, you just crushed that role because you're totally different in, you know, right now in real life than you were as that character. So it's just phenomenal. Go out, you know, download EuroTrip or whatever, buy it, watch it. It's fantastic.
So why Hollywood, and like why'd you get in, and then in what ways are you still connected, like, you know, to the scene?
Hollywood. Well, I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and you know, I was working at a taco stand, and I was just having a really good time. I was having a lot of fun with the customers, and someone just came in and said, "Hey, do you want to be an actor?" I said, I actually already tried that, which I did. I did a commercial when I was like 12. But then I decided acting wasn't for me. It was too much. I didn't like it. But then I was 17. I was working at a taco shop, and someone came in and just asked me, like, "Hey, you seem like you'd be good in acting." And I said, acting. I tried that once. I'm in a band right now. We're going to be huge. It's going to be great. Don't worry about it. He said, okay, great. Well,
wait, what was it called?
What was the band called? Toast.
Of course.
So he said, in case it doesn't work out, just take my card. So I took his card, and and then I called, and then I went in an agent, and I think the first commercial audition I went out for, I booked, and then that was pretty much it.
Wait, so this guy was an agent, and he wanted you to be a prospective actor?
He was a manager. So the difference between an agent and manager is a bit esoteric, but yeah, he was in the representation business, and wanted me to join the ranks of the actors.
Oh, of course. I mean, you're a good-looking dude. Why not? And especially you got characters, so that's what else do you need as an actor?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, say fuck.
That's called stubbing your toe, Dima.
I would say
I
fuck.
Stand by that line.
What else do you need? Romulan ale, by the way.
Didn't know, right? Yeah. He said his band was Toast, not Roast. Toast, right? Okay. So I see you occasionally cross the Twitter feed and jump into the socio-political arena, and we'll share your opinion.
Which is, by the way, I just want to say right now, I completely understand that as an actor, hearing any kind of socio-political commentary or opinion from an actor is it's really not welcome. It's probably not the best idea for me to go out there with like political opinions and stuff like that, because, you know, let's face it, actors don't have the best reputation for thinking clearly on issues. But I can't help it. I just can't help it. Please go ahead.
Have you ever heard Leo talk about climate change? It's serious.
I have. You know, he's actually good. He's actually good on that topic. He's actually it's good.
No, he's not bad. But here's there's a difference between we're going to ask you your opinion versus you making a PSA and shoving your opinion down our throats, which is often what happens, right? We saw that during the election. You know, a whole host of celebrities saying, "Don't vote for this person, or you're not cool." Like,
yeah, but at some point,
I've always wanted to be a part of a PSA where I'm given a script and I read it into the camera like this, and then I see it and it's intercut with actors reading the exact. Do you know what I mean? Like, so every sentence is a different actor saying the next sentence.
That's man.
Always wanted to do one of those, man.
What, to literally splice it up?
No, you've seen that where it's one script, but they cut every.
Oh
actor.
yeah. Oh, but it's you the whole time.
No, what? No.
We're wearing a different outfit. Like,
oh no,
Brian.
He's okay. We can't. No, this.
Okay,
The moment's gone.
The moment is gone.
But you know what I'm talking about, though, right? You know what I'm saying?
100%. Yeah.
But the moments never seems to be right, though, for actors or actresses in Hollywood to come out with the wrong opinion, wrong thing. And
never.
The biggest thing that comes to mind is Matt Damon, who has a very, very sensible opinion. And like he comes up, he goes, "I do believe there's a spectrum of behavior. And we're going to have to figure, you know, there's a difference between, you know, patting someone on the butt and rape or child molestation, right? And those behaviors need to be, you know, confronted and eradicated without question, but, you know, they can't be conflated, right?" Which to me is just absolute obvious, right? I mean, they're levels of bad.
Oh, he's not an advocate. Yeah. That's the problem.
But then instead he gets slammed. He gets slammed by, you know, Minnie Driver was one of them, and the coworkers. And like, where do you think this is like coming from? How are Hollywood folks under a different kind of pressure than everybody else? Because everybody's feeling this to a degree.
I think that they are. Okay, so when we think about Hollywood, when we think about the power structures within Hollywood, I think it's really helpful to think of Hollywood as a royal court. I'm gonna say that again, a royal court, which is to say that, you know, the power centers are never clearly distinguished. Okay, so like obviously there's the king, right, and everyone wants to get close to the king, but how do you get close?
Yeah, who's the king?
Say what?
That's Harvey Weinstein, right?
Used to be. No, actually, you're kind of right. Like that used to
post Napoleon Europe, right? Like once Napoleon's gone, it's like chaos.
Exactly. And we might be experiencing a little bit of that now. Like now that the power structure is kind of is realigning. But that when you're thinking about like how things work in Hollywood you got to think of it more like a royal court where it's not really about there's no specific rules. It's just about who likes who and who's going to promote who against whom. You know, so when you're playing these politics, it's not quite so easy to figure out, you know, what the right thing to say is. And I think Matt Damon kind of got tripped up on that.
Yeah.
Is it that no one is safe based on their political opinion? Like, you know, Clint Eastwood, for example, is one of the premier kind of most well-known Republicans that are in Hollywood. And I don't know if he's been kind of kicked out of the club or if he's not able to get gigs because of that. But is it that, you know, people that have political opinions or stances on issues that are not in line with the status quo, do they get kind of ostracized?
I think so. Yeah, for sure. And I think it's, you know, again, it's because of this sort of court-like culture that pervades Hollywood. And when I mean like a royal court where, you know, again, it's all whisper campaigns, and it's all, you know, like if you're in a royal court and someone decides they don't like you, someone else something bad about you, and that person starts spreading that information about you, you're at court and ruined. You should probably go back to cobbling or whatever you were doing before, because you know, no one's going to take you seriously. And so in Hollywood, you have this thing where other people's perceptions are worth way more than it's worth in any other industry, I think, maybe on Earth.
This almost, it sounds like Hollywood, that culture, what you're describing is almost like a stereotype of like what it meant to be cool in high school, right? Perceptions, you know, don't challenge this person, like figure out the way to act and do it.
Let me put it to you this way. If the highest grossing actor in Hollywood was super duper in favor of border walls and the Second Amendment, then you'd see a lot more border walls in the Second Amendment.
Interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Wait. So it cascades down from one guy.
Wait, okay. Let me go historical here. So you guys are you guys familiar with the Castilian accent?
Yes.
No.
Okay. So
from Spain. Well, right.
Oh, Castilian.
So
Castile. Yeah, sure.
Castilian accent. In Spain. Where'd it come from?
Like
from the king who had a cleft lip or whatever, and that cascaded down to the lower classes. Right? Did we lose Travis?
I think we're on
we
a
may
delay
have lost
or
Travis.
something.
I think my answer to that question was absolutely correct.
So you think, okay, the king of Castile.
Am I still here?
So yeah, you are, but I will say that we like intermittently kind of lose you from time to time. So for listeners out there, apologies. But yeah, no, but I think we got you back right now.
Okay. So it's kind of like this. So it's like with the king had this sort of lisp, and everyone else sort of started to emulate it in order to identify with that center of power. So I think in acting, especially like not all acting, but in Hollywood, you know, you see individuals representing centers of power around which want to orbit. And I think you see that in Hollywood more than you would in other industries, because in other industries you can perform on your own accord. So in other industries you could be the number one seller of Milwaukee. And so if it's in Milwaukee, the business will value that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but if you're an actor and you have all this stuff, if you have like you know, all this, you know, box office draw and stuff like that, well, there must be something about you. There must be something about you that is special and is desirable. So people will start to replicate it on that basis, I think.
Yeah. I mean, what you're describing is that culture. I mean, dare I use the word conservative? You know, you have a higher respect for authority, and things get down like you kind of have to conform or you don't go ahead. I mean, this is, you know, although it's progressive, you know, and it's conservatism. Like, I mean, you're not allowing a lot of laissez-faire. Let's think for yourself. Let's pull a lot of ideas. It's you either follow the line or you don't. Like, I mean, this is obvious when you describe it as conservative in the religious circles, but this is like the left version of kind of very conservative.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about that. I mean, as far as I think you're kind of, I think we need to parse what you mean by conservative.
Right. I just mean in the structure, like conservative meaning respect for authority. Things don't change much within, right, with traditionalism, that you know, we respect the way it was done, and this is the way it's been done in Hollywood for 87 years.
Yeah, but
and,
when people hear conservative, they conflate
right, I know,
it to the
but
I'm
I'm talking about small c, like that something that's preserved, right? Whereas, because to my definition of liberal is we listen to all the facts, and if there's something that we see contravening evidence and we ought to change our minds, we do. Whereas conservatives tend not to, right? Like there's a value in tradition. Like, oh wow, we realize that Moses might not actually be a historical person. Whoa, dude, you can't say it like, hey, look at my evidence. No, we're not gonna screw things up that have worked for 2,000 or 3,000 years. You see what I'm saying? That's what I mean by conservative. Things stay the same.
That makes sense.
Okay, so all right. So yeah, very small c then, very small c, conservative, in as much as that's the way Hollywood has worked, since its inception, and it probably will continue to work. And I think so. So if you want to say that actors are conservative, small c, in that way, in which they are going to maintain and perpetuate the power structures that existed when they got into it, then yeah, I would agree with you on that respect. But I think it all really kind of boils down to who is in charge, what are their politics, what do they believe. For example, if I don't know, if Will Smith, let's say, comes out very much in favor of the Second Amendment, I think you would see some pretty significant movement among actors on that score. You'd see fewer actors participating in anti-Second Amendment ads, for example. Does that make sense?
But is there we don't know
where his rank is. If his rank was high enough,
no. His
rank, but the other thing is he
enough.
might get ostracized out of that community. You can either it might happen the way you said it, that there'd be less, anti-NRA or anti-Second Amendment, or you could just ostracize Will Smith and say, well, he was never one of us in the first place.
Oh, and what's in it for him? That's the real question.
But here's the thing: is it still a business? So he's not going to get ostracized because he does bring in the numbers. Mel Gibson is still making movies because he brings in the numbers. If he didn't bring in the numbers, he would be ostracized for his comments.
No, that's a really good point. On the topic of you not making PSAs, but having opinions, you do call yourself a liberalist, which I think is probably borrowed from Sargon. Good for you. And a progressive apostate, which I assume means that you were a progressive, but then have since dropped the label. So can you talk about the evolution of your ideas from, I don't know, from your prehistoric days to now?
Yeah. I mean, like, I think, I'm a lifelong Democrat, voted for Barack Obama 2 times. I marched against the Iraq War. There's like pictures of me holding
in Las Vegas or Los
Say
Angeles. Again? Was there a march in Los Angeles?
Several. Yeah. Several. Actually, the last time I saw my stepfather was we were marching together at a peace rally.
Wow.
And this was in 2003. So so like in the march up to the Iraq War, I was very active. I mean, I went to ANSWER meetings. ANSWER stands for Act Now to Stop War and Racism. So I was very active in ANSWER meetings. I went to the marches. I actually got on a bus. Here's the thing. I have no idea who paid for this bus, but I got on a bus and rode up to San Francisco, and I went to a march up there. So I was very, very active and it turns out I was right, frankly. I was very put off by the fact that he seemed to not really give a fuck about the weapons inspections. He seemed to just be wanting to go to war no matter what. I thought this was going to be a huge problem. I saw nothing but disaster on the horizon, and I wanted to stop it. Turns out I was right. But so even after that, up until I would say 2012, I called myself a progressive, because I do believe in progressive values. I mean, there's pictures of me with my eldest daughter marching for marriage equality. I'm holding up signs, saying, it's time for marriage equality now. We're gonna get marriage equality, and I still believe. I mean, absolutely, I'm completely committed to that. However, I think something interesting.
Are you equating progressivism with the Democratic Party, the Democratic platform? Because I mean, that sounds like that's the That's the theme, right?
I'm equating progressivism with, I guess, what I then considered social progress. Mm-hmm. Social progress meant peace. It meant equality. It meant solidarity.
Yep.
And that I really believed in, and I still really kind of do. But I think something interesting happened after marriage equality. This would have been, I don't know. Do you guys happen to know off the top of your head when the whole marriage equality thing got settled?
2012, I thought.
12, right? It was, right? Okay. So right around Wikipedia. Right. So right around 2012, I started to get this whiff. It was on the air. There was something strange. There was something not right. And I actually remember it was the body positivity movement. Okay. It was 2012. And it was, I started to remember, I remember seeing something referencing thin privilege. Yeah, that's what it was. Thin privilege. And I was like, thin privilege. Like it blew my mind. I was like, oh, what thin privilege? And then, of course, I thought that was kind of like, I wasn't quite willing to kind of think. And then I started seeing things about white privilege. And then I started seeing things about, that kind of thing. And it occurred to me that the idea of privilege was interesting. As a matter of fact, I was in my early days, as anyone of good conscience is in their early days. I was a staunch, I wasn't say Marxist, but I thought communism was the way to go. I thought we could do better than capitalism. Capitalism oppresses people and it's not that good. And so, I thought like, there's got to be some other economic system. If it's not communism, it's got to be something that's better, that doesn't victimize people and make people feel bad and oppress people and things like that. And so, but then I started to kind of encounter this idea of privilege. And based on all the reading I had done to that point in my life, privilege was something it was a class issue. That was a class issue. When I say class, I don't mean intersectional class. I mean literal economic class. If you were wealthy, you had privilege. If you were not wealthy, you had less privilege. To me, that's the way our capitalist society worked. O.J. Simpson, good example. Had a lot of money. Didn't matter what his race is because he hired a bunch of great lawyers, and got the charges dropped or whatever. Right? He was declared not guilty. So for me, especially growing up in the 90s, especially growing up with O.J. Simpson, right? Like that, the O.J. Simpson verdict. I still remember the O.J. Simpson verdict came down. Can you hear me?
Yeah. And this is in 95, right? Or 96?
Yeah, 95? The O.J. Simpson came. Yeah, the verdict came down, like just after I finished high school, and and I still remember just being impacted by the fact that, it felt somewhat like we were almost entering a post-racial epoch where it should be so clear to everyone that what really mattered it wasn't the color of your skin, it was the size of your pocketbook. So when we talk about privilege, I always kind of thought of privilege as being monetary privilege, economic privilege. And then once I started to hear people talk about privilege as though it was not related to how much money you had, but rather the color of your skin, that's when I started to get a weird feeling like something bad was happening here. Mm-hmm. And I still remember, I think it was either 2012 or 2013, I was at a Seder. My brother's Jewish. And I was at a Seder, my brother's Seder. And out in front of everybody, I say, maybe I had too much Manischewitz. I don't know. And I said, I was like, I'll tell you what we really need to be talking about is not what divides us, but what brings us together. And I was like, what divides us is not our race. It's not our sexuality. It's not our gender. What divides us is the fact that the income inequality is growing. And once that income inequality gets to a tipping point, society starts to collapse. And that's what we need to worry about. We don't need to worry about all this other, privileges and all these other things. What we really need to worry about, and I'm all, Manischewitz stuff. I'm gunning it. And I kind of give this diatribe about how the important things about us really in this capitalist system is our income and the privileges that gives us access to, that gives us entree to. So it was like 2012 is when I really kind of started to kind of realize that something bad was happening. And then I started to kind of, and that's when I really started noticing when people started to say things that I would now very quickly recognize as being a part of whatever this epistemology is that we had to name, whatever this epistemology is that has kind of overtaken the far left. And it is in that they've overtaken the far left, but it's also overtaken pop culture, it's overtaken the news media, and it's overtaken a number of subcultures.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting that like when they call it woke, right? Being woke. This reminds me of like things like the Great Awakening. You know, so there are those on the left that get pissed when I compare this to like a religion, but yet you call it woke, like that's distinctly a religious term. Like it seems like the following here, it is very much related to religion, and you want to profess, even if there is cognitive dissonance. Like, wow, Matt Damon, you know, that sounds right. That yeah, there are probably levels, but you know what's more important is that we don't speak out against victims so bad. Like this is saying, well, yeah, like the Bible doesn't always make sense, but hey, I'm not going against God. I mean, this does it has a religious quality to it, and just when people say woke, I mean, what do you think about that? Does it take on a religious air to you?
Of course it does. Of course it does. I mean, look, the you know, people talk a lot about how, you know, the far left is like a cult and they're religious and stuff like that. But what religion? What religion? Do you guys have any ideas on that?
What religion? I mean, this
left? And I'm asking that kind of Socratically because I kind of have an answer, but I'm wondering like what your take on it is.
I mean, like obviously it's quasi-religious. It's not traditionally religious, but to me, I call it's more ideologic. That they have an ideology that's kind of combined parts of postmodernism. It's and has some neo-Marxist elements. It's anti-capitalist. It's very zero-sum game, oppressor versus oppressed. So I don't know what to call it.
I will say that, because this is so top of mind for me, because I'm finishing up The Fountainhead right now, and I by no means am, you know, a converted objectivist or Ayn Randian, but all of it very much screams of the type of ideology that she was describing in that book. The when you suppress people who are of quality and you gather all of the losers, then everyone else ends up being on one moral or on one plane of existence. Everyone is just mediocre and shitty, but at least we're all equal. And so that's kind of what this is sounding like. It's a type of religion that that praises mediocrity, and I don't know how right that is, but that's what I would say is the religious element of it.
Have you read? By the way, just on a side note, have you read Anthem?
I have. I fucking loved it. That was amazing. Right. Well, that's her very first book. Yeah. Yeah.
To me, Anthem speaks a lot more towards where we're at now than either The Fountainhead or Atlas. So,
okay.
That's my personal.
Yeah, but Anthem was much more of a dystopian society where.
Well, that's where we're going.
Okay.
That's the last stop.
Yeah,
that's the last stop.
Well, I was going to say, because right now we're more in the Fountainhead society where we're kind of, you know, there are people who are preaching this mediocrity. There are people who are trying to oppose it, and we're still struggling. Anthem is the last stop. They've lost. That's it.
Yeah, we lost.
I agree. I believe that their ideals are a utopian ideal. In same ways that the religious, a fundamentalist religious might be. Like if you're a fundamentalist Islamic person, practicing,
Leninists had utopian ideals.
Right, but right, or you're practicing every bit that the Bible tells you, or the Quran, or whatever. Like when you strive for utopia, you end up in dystopia.
I agree.
Right. Yeah.
I'm still very interested in
as far as religion goes. Here's my take on it. Okay, is basically in the early days of Christianity, there were a number of different religions that were kind of vying for, you know, dominance and vying for people's hearts. Basically, it was like a hearts and minds campaign among a bunch of different religions, and one of them was Gnosticism. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, this current my word for it is neo-progressivism. This current ideology, okay, is very similar to Gnosticism, in as much as you have this sort of dualist faith, right? It's not a radical dualism where it's, you know, one side is equal to the other side, like a yin yang symbol. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's not how it works. It's more of a, what's that word? Mitigate. It's more like a mitigated dualism, mm-hmm. where one is better than the other. Okay, and so those two sides are, you have the monad, right? In Gnosticism, you have the monad, which is the Godhead, which is the spiritual essence. It's the clear truth. It's the light. It's what actually is. Okay, and then you have the demiurge. The demiurge is the creator of the material world, and also the demiurge is the creator of the material nature of humanity. Okay, so in my opinion, you know, and especially this is really kind of informed through sort of the more spiritual aspects of feminism, like bell hooks and that kind of thing, where you have the masculine energy, which is the demiurge, which is the energy that created our material world. Like if you look around you, look at all these built environments. It's engineering. It's masculine energy made manifest in our physical surroundings. You know, and then you have the monad, which is sort of like this true spiritual self, where your true humanity, your true connection to everyone else is actualized. And I think that as far as religion goes, when you're talking about the sort of anti-enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, that side, to me, it's very Gnostic. It's very dualist, and it's very much an acknowledgement. It's an understanding. It's not even an acknowledgement. It's an understanding. Because, like, you know, Soren Kierkegaard said that the last step to true understanding is faith. So, in as much as that's the case, the understanding is that we live in this world that's caught by the demiurge. And our goal as people should be to ascend out of that material world and into the realm that the demiurge inhabits. And I forget the name of it. God, it starts with a P. I don't remember, but anyway, so that's the goal of I don't know, the far leftists. What do you want to call them? I call them neo-progressives. Look, full disclosure, I call them neo-progressives. I don't like social justice warriors. I think social justice warrior is it's a pejorative. It's not helpful. I say neo-progressive.
Yeah, but I know that people like social justice warriors, so they don't treat it as a pejorative. I mean, some people do, but okay, but in the battle for the hearts and minds. In the battle for hearts and minds, if our side is calling them social justice warriors, it makes our side look like we're not taking them seriously, and we're not taking ourselves seriously.
No,
so that actually
want to avoid the ad hominem if that's the way it's perceived. Sure.
Yeah, but then you're going to pick a different label as an ad hominem, like neo-progressive. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a, you know.
And obviously, there's always the danger in assigning a label to your ideological opponent that you're constructing a straw man, right? I get it. I completely get it. But, you know, I actually have, you know, so basically, okay, so here's what I was going to throw to you guys is, you know, you guys are in charge of MythCon, a great event. And maybe you do have this already and I just don't know about it. But, you know, what I would love to see at MythCon is kind of this exact conversation about, like, what is this thing that we're working against? Ideological opponents. What they really like to do is they like to use kind of a Mott and Bailey defense where they'll say something crazy and then you'll be like, that's fucking crazy, and they'll be like, oh, but I'm not that person though. And then they'll kind of like they'll scoot back a little bit and eschew labels. They love to eschew labels. You can't ever pin them down on a label. We're not labeled. So, you know, in as much as that's the case, that actually has been to their benefit because they can pretend that what they're doing doesn't even exist. Yeah. So they're just characters. I think what really good.
To answer your question, like, what do we do? So the goal of MythCon is to establish dialogue between the opposing sides. So really, I say, look, if you want to come to MythCon and you want to like engage respectfully with others, bring whatever opinion you want. You could be the hardcore social justice warrior. If you're wanting to engage in a respectful way via discourse, bring it. If you want to throw M80s or chant and disrupt,
metaphorically M80s.
So no. So really, like all of this, it's an attempt to restore dialogue, because what I'm seeing at college campuses are with the Charles Murray in Vermont, that turning around, turning your backs, chanting, disrupting, you know, at Queens College with Jordan Peterson, the Night of the Living Dead, and they're pounding on the walls. You see these, how is that not harassment? I mean, how is this not scary? Like this is, and there is a shutting down of dialogue. So what we're trying to do is establish it. So if you do want to argue a neo-Marxist, and again, or a neo-progressive, or whatever you want to call it, and I don't mean it to be a pejorative, if you want to argue that view in a respectful way, bring it. Like we want, go ahead, but you're not going to disrupt. That's kind of, so that's what we're trying to establish, because I'm seeing many on the left saying, you know, I no longer believe in the marketplace of ideas. The best ideas don't always rise to the top, and therefore it becomes a zero-sum strategy game. We must shut them down, and that's tyranny. That's tyranny.
And the important thing is that we don't come in with a dog in the fight. We
have our personal opinions.
Yeah, we're obviously entitled to personal opinions, but
doesn't have an opinion.
At the same time, you know, the organization is incredibly respectful to everyone who comes here, to all the speakers, and we truly try to put out the type of dialogue that we think people are going to be interested in, and it could be any position, as long as you have the balls to get on stage and talk about it
in a respectful way.
Yeah, in a respectful way. And that is what we end up
right
where we end up having, you know, finding difficulty in, is that there are people who are very adamant about certain positions, but they literally don't have the balls to get up on stage and talk about what their convictions are. And if that's the case, then, you know, your position will always be, you know, relegated to the shadows. But we always say, if you feel strongly and you have good evidence and you really want to, you know, to persuade an audience, get in touch with us, get on stage, talk to someone who has an opposing viewpoint. We'll find someone who has an opposing viewpoint and we'll put them up and, you know, to steel man their side.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I really respect that. And I think that's exactly what we need. You know, as far as dialogue going between, you know, these two sides. But the problem is and I think you kind of know this, the problem is the neo-progs, they don't really want a dialogue.
Some don't.
They're not interested.
Some don't. And I don't see them
being particularly eager to engage in a dialogue.
That's unfortunately that's true in many cases. And so what's important is that, you know, anyone on a MythCon stage needs to want to be on stage. Like with Thomas Smith, at some point he didn't want to be on stage, and this is why you get, you know, kind of opening with Dimitri says an uppercut, you know, kind of yelling at the, you know, almost like shaming the opponent for, you know, they're shaming their character as opposed to actually addressing their arguments. And that's not what we consider respectful dialogue. If you want to say, look, man, you've got it all wrong, this is kind of a better way of looking at things, that's fine. And but people got away from that. I mean, there's those on the right that do the same thing. I mean, identitarian movements, like the alt-right is awfully identitarian. This is a white identitarian movement that thinks that there's something about whiteness that informs the Enlightenment. That's messed up, right? And then there's something about some of the hardcore social justice warriors that, you know, that's pervasive, that you can look at somebody's skin color, and if they're black, and you can say, well, you're oppressed. Are you going to tell me Jay-Z and Beyonce are oppressed? You're going to tell me they're more oppressed than some like kid in a trailer that doesn't have a father and an alcoholic mother? Like, you're going to say because he's white, he's more privileged? I mean, this is absurd. This is a binary. This is why, like, the religion concept of heaven and hell doesn't make sense, right? A binary, absolute torture or absolute bliss. nothing in between.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you are an oppressed person. There can't be a black person that isn't oppressed. There can't be a white person that is oppressed. This is bullshit. Okay. Like, you know, so like to me, that's my opinion. Now, if you want to argue that, then yeah, bring on your argument. I don't think it's going to hold water. But if your argument is chanting, you know, something anti-gay, MythCon, go away, then no.
It's not that, Brian. And what the argument that I've heard is that when you come on stage with someone who has ideas that you don't agree with, you legitimize them by your mere presence, and thus you're making them more real than they actually are. And that's an idiotic argument, because you can't kill ideas by just ignoring them.
So, but didn't Hillary showing up at Donald Trump legitimize Donald Trump?
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
It's actually not an idiotic argument, as far as they're concerned. Now, I think it's idiotic. However, I mean, okay, so I think, you know, getting back to what I was saying earlier, I think we need to understand better, and I think, you know, in the pro-enlightenment community, I don't know what the fuck you want to call it, but I think in like the pro-enlightenment community, there needs to be a better understanding of, you know, not only what the core values that these people have are, but why they have them. So, you know, like when you say like, you know, like, so for example, like, you know, getting to what you said, you know, they honestly believe that what you ignore is what you accept. Mm-hmm. They honestly believe that. That's why that's why tolerance is white supremacy. Because if you tolerate an idea, that means you implicitly accept and endorse it. So if you honestly hold that belief, like, you have to understand that these people honestly hold that belief, like, in their heart of hearts. Yeah. So then it becomes a little more understandable. Like, okay, so basically, like, for me, getting back to the question about like when did I, you know, start on this journey? For me, I realized that I needed to better understand what the arguments were, and like not only what the arguments were, because the arguments, you know, to me really didn't hold water. So the arguments weren't important. I needed to understand what the core values were and where they came from. Mm-hmm. And I still feel that in the pro-enlightenment community, whatever you want to call it, there is still a lack of understanding of what the core arguments are, like what the core beliefs are, like the actual core, like the revealed truths, what that they believe that we don't, and why they believe them. And I still think, I mean, Sargon's done some really good research. A lot of people have done some good research. Vernaculus, I'm not going to sit here and like just shout out YouTubers, but you know, there's been a lot of good people that have done a lot of good research.
That's the question that we were going to ask you anyway is who do you watch and who do you respect, and you know, who listeners can follow if they share their viewpoint, your viewpoint.
This is a good question. I think that it has to do with, like, there's a certain anti-capitalist sentiment in here. There's a disgust for like the system that produces such inequality. Right? There's a disgust.
I disagree. I don't think it's I'm sorry to interrupt you. I apologize. I don't think it's an anti-capitalist mentality. I think it's because they don't really promote an alternate economic system. You know, we talk about the fact that they're neo-Marxist or they're neo-Maoist or something like that, but it's not like they're out, you know, because they don't want to own the means of production. They don't really care. They're not interested in economics. That's not on their
tearing the system down, though. They're interested in tearing down what they feel are the impressive forces, like the patriarchy. You do see, and if you mentioned bell hooks, you see the word capitalist like appear all the time.
Right. Those are, yeah. And what I do is when I read that, I kind of supplant those with the demiurge. Right? When they talk about capitalist patriarchy, they're talking about the demiurge. When they talk about systemic racism, they're talking about the demiurge. I mean, they're just talking about this religious construct that they have. They're not really talking about it in any real terms that can be understood or argued against or for. They're referring to, they're referring to Satan.
Sure. No, exactly. And you must rebuke him, right? In the Apostles' Creed, right. You don't just deny Satan. You don't avoid him. You rebuke him. And
and you certainly don't tolerate Satan. You don't tolerate Satan.
You definitely don't. Right. You rebuke it. So there is this thought of, okay, well, and it seems I'm sympathetic to it in this much that yes, racism is bad, that there is inequality. When you do the demographics of poor, you see African Americans like overrepresented. If you look at like some of the statistics and prison sentence, you see the longer sentences, but the analysis seems to be it's racism. So let's say it's 10% racism or 5%, right? And 90% something else. It's this desire to eradicate it completely, when I don't think you ever do. And when you get when a 95% solution won't work and you have to go to 100%, then like you wreck everything else. Like if we say mosquito bites are the worst thing and then we eradicate mosquitoes, well, what happens? Like, well, you're going to create an ecological cascade that's going to have all kinds of unintended consequences. And I think that's what we're doing is this. Okay, yeah, we're targeting good things, but we're so over aggressive that now our solution has become a bigger problem than the problem, or certainly as bad or bad in a different way, but not very tolerable.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's my, and again, I can empathize. I like racism sucks. Like the class inequality, I think is a huge deal. Like, but the thing is, I don't understand how poverty is any easier for white people than black people. To me, poverty like doesn't care about skin color.
If we're talking about this as a religious construct, I tend to agree, Brian, that it does boil down to a hatred of capitalism. I know, Travis,
or hatred of racism, even. I mean, maybe
no, it doesn't have to be hatred, because capitalism, of course, is the enemy of the common man, and the common man is a minority.
But not all. I guess that's part. I mean, like Jane Kungar is a good example. He comes out strongly for social justice, but he also comes out for capitalism.
Well, to tie it back into what I was saying, though, I mean, like, understand capitalism is essentially the force by which we have come about our material world, right? Our physical material world. We would not have these buildings. You would not have those delicious beers. I would not have this microphone. We wouldn't have all of this stuff if it wasn't for capitalism. So capitalism is the creator of this physical world, and it is the force to which a large part of our souls are dedicated. So again, that is the religious fundament of this ideology to me. So yes, I agree that capitalism, they associate capitalism is associated with negativity. And in my opinion, it's associated with negativity because of its association with this force that created our material world. And that's the thing that I'm saying is the demiurge, and that's the negative part of the duality.
So that one conversation that you had during your brother's Seder, that's what launched you into this space where you've taken up this label as a liberalist, shed the label of a progressive, and now this is just life. This is the truth, the path forward, the truth, the light. So to speak.
Well, I think what it was when I came out of the closet, as it were, in front of my friends and family. I mean, these are my friends and family that I was talking to. And there was this uncomfortable silence. Everyone just kind of looked at each other like, oh, geez. And I realized, oh shit, I'm in the wilderness. Like I'm off on my own. Like there's no one out here but me. And so I think that's what it was, is when I kind of realized that I was no longer a part of the tribe.
Yeah.
And how did
the sort of leftist tribe that
any apostate, right? I mean, if you start to question your God and your theology, and then everybody looks at you like, dude, what are you saying, man? Like, yeah, you can feel that way.
So then how did you find souls who were aligned with your method of thinking? How did you get to the YouTubers? I mean, you mentioned Sargon. Clearly you know who he is, and some other folks who, I think I asked that question, who else you listen to, but how did you even find this community?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I guess I was just kind of, bouncing around on YouTube, and I think I literally just saw one of Sargon's early Gamergate clips. And frankly, I'm not a I'm not a gamer per se. Actually, I'm sorry. I don't mean per se. I hate it when people misuse per se. I'm not a gamer really. But you know, I kind of identified with a lot of his positions and kind of where he was at philosophically and where he was at in, you know, just his position, which seemed to be against this sort of identity politics. And that was not even a phrase that I had at that time. But, you know, it was that your characteristics gave you some sort of, you know, insight into the human condition that people of other characteristics don't have. And all that, you know, it's all related to, this is, okay. So there's a school of philosophy. Are you guys familiar with this? Phenomenology? Phenomenology?
I know phrenology is.
No, I've heard the phrase. Nope.
Phrenology is a little different. Yeah. So I think, I mean, I could be completely, you know, butchering the pronunciation of this thing, but it's phenomenology. And it's basically the idea that, that one's lived experiences is a suitable or a valid form of knowledge. So throughout Western society, we've had these ideas where, you know, it's kind of like this Cartesian thing where, you know, reality is, you know, it consists of objects interacting with one another. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the deconstructionists have sort of worked it so that what's really important are people's lived experiences, and we can collect those and we can use that as data for, you know, for whatever conclusions we want to draw. So, you know, so what's really important about us is our lived experiences, as opposed to the actual, you know, there is no objective truth. There is just people's lived experiences and their interpretations therein.
Okay.
So, this is the opposite of like huge data, right? Like in medicine, like the best evidence is a prospective double-blinded trial, right? Where you're not looking back at the data, you're setting something up in advance, asking the question, blinding people to this, right? And then, you know, but the worst bit of evidence is a single case study, right? And to me, that's a bit of a lived experience, right? You could have that. Well, man, I've had these patients, like they don't fit the mold. And while like it makes sense to, okay, if you identify a minority within a minority and think that these people, you know, you could treat this patient differently, okay, that's fine. But to deny that, or to just somehow put the N of 1 over the N of 1,000 and then make your policies that way, that's silly. Like, so there's value to like personal experience, but that is not a good substrate to build policy on.
Well, but unfortunately, that's exactly what's happening, because you have studies that are, you know. So I read Daryl Wing Sue's, you know, microaggressions paper from 2007, right? And I actually went down the rabbit hole and I actually looked up all the references that he used when he talks about how, you know, racism is increasing and racism, and all it is it's just, you know, it's all of that. It's just asking people about their lived experiences and assembling it and compiling it and offering it as objective data.
Yeah.
That's the beating heart of this thing.
So there's a question here in the chat that says that you previously said that tolerance is white supremacy. I'm curious if that is a position the hosts agree with. No,
tolerance is white supremacy.
No, tolerant. Yeah, like tolerance. That, like, this is saying if you're on the hard left, like it's not that you must condemn, you know, the Sargon. You must condemn the Spencer, or wherever your line is at. That you can't say, all right, those guys are fringe. You got to let them speak, though. Like, that's toleration, right? That you know. So no, toleration is not white supremacy. This is silly, and if it is, there are a whole host of minorities that are white supremacists, because there are plenty of people of minority ilk, trans, black, you name it, that are Sargon fans.
Not white supremacists. They're supremacists of their own subgroup. And so if that's the case, then anyone who is proud to be black is now a black supremacist.
Yeah, then that's bullshit too, right? I mean, yeah,
we live in a society. We interact with
there's a striving for this oversimplistic answer, and this is my problem with religion as well. Is that, again, heaven or hell? This is something that a child thinks. Absolute evil, absolute good, that they can't see the shades of gray. And that it seems like you're being so, I'm sorry, fundamentally religious about this, that you're heaven or hell, that you must condemn these people to the nth degree with every breath, or you're part of them. So it's the George Bush. You either with us or you're against us.
Travis, there's a couple of questions which you can field at any point in time, but
I just real quick though, before can I just jump in? What was that question about the I just want to clarify. In my opinion, you know, like in my sort of experience, my lived experience, if you will, it's that you know, that it's very easy to associate tolerance of a bad idea with, you know, like, well, then that means that you task that idea. So if you know, so for like example, if you're the ACLU and you're going to tolerate the white supremacists having their rally, then that means that you then must support the white, you know, like that's a you know, the personal is political, as it were.
I know. Well, this is ridiculous. I mean, like, so then therefore all these people, right, intersectionalists band together, and all the minorities are grouped under one, you know, gays, and then also like fundamentalist Muslims. So if they're going to tolerate fundamentalist Muslims, then therefore they're Muslim. Well, that's ridiculous too, right? You know, like they're tolerating a certain amount of things, and you know, that's the thing. Their own ideology is inconsistent, because like certain minority groups, the rights of gays and trans are up against very religious conservative Muslims. Like, and to have those under the same banner, you're bound to have problems. So all the time, like this, you know, they just brush it under the rug.
So Travis, the question from the audience is really where do you derive your viewpoints from, your educational background, what kind of brought you to all of this, and secondly to that, what, you know, and I've asked this before, but without Brian interrupting, who do you listen to on say on YouTube? What podcast do you listen to? What informs your opinions?
Well, I think so. First of all, you know, back in the 90s, late 90s, I was a staunch. By the way, is my audio okay? My audio?
Yeah, you're good. Right now.
Right now. So yeah, back in the late 90s, I was a staunch postmodernist. You know, I read. I have a copy of America that's highlighted and thumbnailed all the hell. I was, you know, the postmodern condition by Lyotard really kind of blew my mind. You know, I was a big fan, and actually, I still have it. I had this really long. When I say I have it printed out. I had this like really long email exchange with a buddy of mine. That's sort of been like 2000, where he was a newly minted objectivist, and so he was very, very passionate about his objectivism, and I was a postmodernist, and so we were kind of like, you know, in this I guess, you know, we're in this argument about the nature of truth, the fundamental nature of truth. And so I still have a lot of very postmodern views on reality and length, but most of them are linguistic views. The postmodern linguists, I kind of identify with that a little bit more. You know, I do think that language frames reality in a certain way, and so that your perception of reality is inherently tied to the language that you speak. So the language that you use to refer to things is incredibly important. For example, if you go to South America, I was just in Brazil. You know, if you ask for papas fritas, what does that mean? Well, in America, we're taught that papas fritas means French fries. But if you go down to South America, you find out it just means fried potatoes. You know, it says papas fritas on the menu. You could get French fries. You know, you might get steak fries. You might get skinny fries. You might get shoestring. I mean, you could get all kinds of different fried potatoes. You might get potato chips. I don't know. And so, you know, it's that kind of thing where you know, the language and the specificity of the language. You know, Eskimos having a billion names for words for snow, for example. Like that's all very important. So I understand that, and so I understand where. You know, I understand where the neo-progressives are coming from when they talk about, you know, when they co-opt a lot of these postmodern ideas and they insist that words are violence. Because if you conceptualize the words as violence, if you honestly refer to words as violence, then they can become violence. So I get where they're coming from in a lot of ways on that point. But, I do think that we, as human beings within a society, we still need a way to refer to things that the other person is going to understand. And, ultimately, I do think that is probably it's not perfect, but it's the best method that we actually have to determine properties about the world around us that are predictable, not only for us, but for other people.
Yeah, postmodernism to me, it's not necessarily slang. I think postmodernism is applicable where things like science don't. Like if I say, evaluate this piece of art, is this a good piece of art? Like science has nothing to say on whether that's a good piece of art or if it's well made, but like you could postmodern, like if you can deconstruct this. Like what is the meaning of this? Like this is the language.
What's the definition of art? Like how do you define art?
Exactly right. What is art?
It's very meta.
So like I don't say that postmodernism doesn't have, like, if you're trying to talk about a like a impactful experience, science isn't going to do shit for you. So again, like this is fine, but when we're trying to like do policy and like for schools and stuff, like this is not the way to do it. And to me, like again, rooting out inequality is fine. If they would just honestly use, instead of white privilege, that minority disadvantage, you watch the problems go away. Because like people get beyond that. Yeah, there's some people that are disadvantaged. There are absolutely some people that are disadvantaged, but like white privilege suggests that you didn't work for it. It was all handed to you. And that every white person, it's connotated that every white person has it.
Yeah.
Or else you would just call it privilege.
Brian, even minority disadvantage would have its problems because you could have some.
It'd be a lot better.
Some poor white kids who are also
Fine. Well, I'd rather sit on a tack than a nail. But like, that's still. Both are gonna hurt. One's gonna hurt less.
No. So Travis, the whole point is we obviously share a lot of viewpoints. We had a fabulous discussion. The real question is whether you're, going to be in attendance in September when we, kick this stuff off on stage with a whole host of speakers. And every show, we tell people, hey, make it out here to Milwaukee as best as you can. So, it's a short hop from LA to Milwaukee.
No, I'd love to. We can talk about it for sure. Let's talk about it offline. But I think so. Just getting back to kind of something I threw out there before, and I'm not sure if you guys gently deflected this in a very political way or if things just got sidetracked. But I mean, with all due respect to the anti-enlightenment side and their ability to come to MythCon and civilly talk about their ideas and everything, for me personally, as a pro-enlightenment person, I do think that it would be very beneficial. Like, and maybe this isn't the right venue, maybe this isn't the right environment, but I do think that it would be really about what exactly are we're talking when we talk about like the SJWs, and I'm doing this with my fingers. I don't know if that's coming through on the camera, but the SJWs or the regressive left or whatever you want to call it. It's clearly just of ideas. There's a certain amount of idea that other people don't, and I think that what's actually important and actually almost our free is that we get together and we figure out what are those exact ideas that we disagree with. Because right now, we come to the conversation and we say, oh, it's feminist, post-structuralist, postmodern, intersectional, neo-Marxist, this and this and this, and that's not helping. I think that's not helpful to me. I think what would really be more helpful is to figure out, number one, what are the ideas that exactly that we're disagreeing with, and should we apply a label to these ideas? Yeah. And I know that's very dangerous, and I know that I get all the arguments against that. But what I would love to see, and I don't know if anyone else agrees with me, but I would love to see an actual debate, perhaps between two people who think that maybe we should come up with a label and maybe we shouldn't. You know, and like, because like I would love to hear the reasons why we shouldn't. I mean, I understand that, but like the big reason is that, you know, we might just sort of come up with a label that is absolutely inapplicable to anything anyone believes on the other side. But you know, and then we create a straw man and all this other stuff. But you know, I don't know. I think it's an interesting conversation because, you know, ultimately, whenever I'm talking to a neo-progressive, the number one thing that they like to do is deny the fact that they believe anything. They're like, I believe nothing. I mean, they're like the weird the nihilists from Big Lebowski. They're like, we believe nothing. I believe nothing. Like, you can't pin them down on anything. And I think ultimately, if we're going to win a battle of ideas, we have to make we have to make our branding clear. We have to say, you know, if you believe in listen and believe, okay? If you believe that context is irrelevant, if you believe that your skin color defines your validity, if you believe that words are violence, if you believe that the personal is political, then you're part of a very particular set of ideas. Because I don't believe in any of that stuff. So I think it's kind of important, you know, like we need to make the consumer make a choice. Like, are you going to believe that you just unconditionally listen to and believe people without evidence, or not? You know,
hopefully when we do get to MythCon, that question will be answered. In one instance with the Sargon carrier conversation, I think that's going to be key because they're going to be talking about the intersections of atheism and social justice and some secularism, I think, a third topic. So that'll really be a clash of ideas right there because both are very intelligent guys, very grounded, and so they'll really have a clash of ideals there. And the second topic that we have that's at the conference is the Steelman and the defense of intersectionality. So that I would put intersectionality in that same bucket of what you would call neo-progressivism. And so there are going to be people on stage who are going to be defending it, and obviously folks who disagree with it. So that'll be a real clash of ideas. So
yeah, that's cool.
If there's anything else that we've missed, because every year we kind of brainstorm, hey, you know, what ideas would be interesting for folks. And so those bubbled up to the surface from the last MythCon. And so we'll kind of see how this goes. And obviously our schedule is already defined for 2018, but we are always looking for how we can improve and what types of people we can put out there. So we'd love your your take on this.
A feminist, and
well, I love that.
We have that. But two women, one that defines as anti-feminist and the other a feminist, going to talk about that, and Marissa Jade Johnson against, talking with Derek Blackman. And a lot of these things are going to come up. And I think that more important than the labels are all of those ideas that you accept. If words are violence, like if you believe that. So I would say, yeah, like that's your idea. Those that believe words without violence, yeah, it's a longer label, but that nails it, man. You don't need a label if you're going to say that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess what I would argue is that, well, first of all, I have very strong steelmen for all of these points. Coming from postmodernism, I'm very familiar with a lot of the arguments, and I agree with them to a certain extent. I just think that they're taking that once they enter the political realm, they become a little bit toxic. Like when they're in this sort of esoteric realm of the philosophical nature of truth, they really apply very well. But then once you kind of take them into, the social context and the context of how people interact with one another, they kind of start to become a little bit gross and not really helpful. But I do have, I have very strong steelmen for all of these. And I think that's great. I think that's what we need to be doing, is we need to be trying to steelman these ideas so that we can figure out, exactly what goes into them. Because I think that there's a lot of people out there that are just baffled, that are just like, their hair is blown back and they have absolutely no idea what these people are talking about. And I think that, educate the philosophical, religious, and academic origins of these ideas would be extremely beneficial, I think, probably for everybody.
You know why they're baffled, Travis? Because they wake up in the morning and they go to work and they make money and then they come home and then they interact with their families. They don't have time for this bullshit. And so that's why the common whatever citizen of the country is like, you know, totally above me when you talk about 2 + 2 is actually 5.
No, but I think it's the language. This is why I don't like white privilege, and I would prefer minority disadvantage, because it doesn't immediately give you that knee jerk of, all right, I'm probably going to get called a racist, so here up comes my shield, right? Like I was talking to a woman that we were talking about voter ID laws, right? And she was like, okay, are voter ID laws racist? And I'm like, well, the point is to get rid of fraud, right? That is not racist or not. And she was like, well, how do they propose to do that? Well, you have a voting ID. And he said, well, did you know that minority, like in like this minority, here's the data, don't even have driver's license or ID cards. I'm like, really? So like she's saying, so therefore you would, if you're going to use that as your standard, unfairly like get at this. And he goes, you know, these people like, you know, sometimes have to take 3 bus stops to get to work. It's going to be harder for them to vote. So although maybe your intent isn't racist, the effect of whatever you're proposing is. Okay, that's fine. Well, then let's take that into account. But as opposed to, you're a voter ID guy, oh, so you're a racist, immediately stops at the conversation, stops all understanding. You don't even find out where that person's coming from. So that's what I want to get down to, is to stop that ad hominem and saying, okay, well, see, those people talking like that, seeing it from different perspectives. Yeah, that's a conversation. This, if you don't condemn this,
I don't want to get too far
on the stage. That gets nowhere.
I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but I mean, you know, if I was a good neo-progressive, I would tell you that the intent of the law is irrelevant, because what's being created is the structure of racism, right?
Well, then the counter would be like, okay, well then you believe that there shouldn't be murder 1 and murder 2, because it doesn't matter. Premeditated murder is the same as vehicular manslaughter. Would they to be consistent, they would have to agree with that.
We live in a very rational world. If you use your example, if you can't take an hour out of your day once every 10 years to go and get a goddamn piece of paper, then you're too dumb to vote. I mean, frankly, that's what it comes down to. It's an hour every 10 years.
Deem a comedy show. But I mean, you could be in a position, right? Like there is early voting, but the thing is, there is parental privilege, right? If your parents teach you how to do something, and your other parents didn't, like one person's going to know how to fish, and the other one didn't. You know, like so. I understand that some people may have like a head start, or somebody, or like have a slow start, but intent is everything. And I guess that I would argue that to the bone.
What about you? That's what we should pray to, intent.
Yeah, I completely agree. And unfortunately, you know, the notion that context and intent are irrelevant, we've seen it with Count Dankula. You know, we even saw it on your stage. You know, we saw it on your stage where Thomas came out against Sargon, and you know, he brought out the tweet first thing. And so the context of the tweet and the intent of the tweet were not important, because yeah, I mean, I could literally get into a very long discussion about like why the intent and the context are not as important as the effect that it has on the listening audience. But you know, yeah, I mean, these people, even like I feel like a lot of these neo-progressive, they don't understand why they think the things they think. And I know that Sargon he understands that too. Like he knows that. Like Thomas clearly. It might be like I've done a podcast with Thomas. He's a good guy. I don't know if he's as necessarily well versed in the background of his own ideology as someone like Sargon is. And you know, I think that you know, as a community, I mean, I don't know if we're getting closer to time, but this might be a good place to kind of start to wrap things up. Is you know, I think as a community, and I think that what you guys are like, I think the thing that you guys are doing, which is so fucking valuable, is that ultimately you are bringing together a community, and it's creating a better understanding of exactly what it is we're looking at here. You know, when people get together, they educate one another. There's this didactic that happens almost reflexively. But that only happens when you're in the same physical space. And that's when other people can start to educate one another on, things like phenomenology.
Mm-hmm. And did you, speaking of your discussion with Thomas, was it civil and friendly and entertaining?
Civil. I don't know if it was entertaining. It was not super friendly. It was
not super friendly. What?
It was a podcast. It wasn't Thomas's podcast. It wasn't SIO. It was another one, and it was about a lawsuit that the Berkeley Republicans were bringing because they got their events canceled and stuff like that.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think there was a vet Falark had put a restraining order on Troy, somebody or other, and that they were countersuing. Like the restraining order was put on in an unethical way. And I think there's a law podcast that has Andrew Torres, and it's called.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Something. I can't remember the name of it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But well,
yeah.
I don't know.
I
feel like it's weird to not be nice to your guests.
Well, no, but I mean, if you want to.
No, it's fine. It was fine.
But this is I guess this is like, I don't mean to pick on you about the labels, but what I feel is
you do
labels.
You do mean
it's one extra encumbrance to getting to the understanding, because person might immediately feel defensive on the label. That's all. So if you say, hey, I believe that intent doesn't matter, rather than saying like, oh man, you progressives, like, it'd be like, well, why do you believe that? And like, how do you deal with the murder one, murder two? Just take the idea, say, okay, that's interesting, which means, all right, I'm not convicting your character, but why in the heck do you believe that? Like,
yeah, I completely understand. I totally get what you're saying, and you're absolutely right. A lot of times labels can, hinder the conversation. However, I do feel like, this ideology is so specific, okay, and it's so prevalent, and it's so undefined. It's just I'm having a hard time figuring out like how it can be so completely undefined, but so very obvious and specific that we're coming up with ad hoc terms like social justice warrior, instead of coming at it with a little bit more of an academic respect for this thing, and actually come up with a label that's not social justice warrior, that actually kind of is more sort of, encompassing the very specific things that they believe, because they believe very specific things that I do not.
Right, but then you could, like, just like a Christian, you might believe all of it. You're a fundamentalist, and you know the scripture, and you believe all of it, and you've got justifications for all of it. Or you're just like, you really feel like Christian means something to you, and you own 2 or 3 bits of it, and you own those really hard, but you don't really even understand the rest. I mean, like, so, like, that's all I'm saying is, like, we have to, you've got to be able to delineate between the two. So it's really hard. That's why I like to stick to, like, you said, that's those who believe intent doesn't matter. Those that believe that words are violence. Like, that's great. You nailed it.
But it's in one breath to say, this is the person that thinks that you should listen and believe, that validity is relative to identity, that context and intent are irrelevant, that words are violence, and that the personal is political. I mean, it's very difficult to tell that.
If you're going to get rid of someone, you're going to have to take each of those 5 one at a time, and say, why is the personal political, and work through that. Why does intent not matter? Like, you're going to literally have to dig through all of those if you hope to change the person's mind, I would think.
No, I completely understand what you're saying. However, again, I'm thinking in terms of people who, like you say, are trying to go to a job, they're trying to come home, and they don't have time to sit there and parse through all of these sort of like esoteric philosophical conundrums. And, it's just, I want to offer people, like, do you want Coke or Pepsi? Like during the Red Scare, I know this is probably a terrible thing to bring up, but like during the Red Scare, it was like, you're either a capitalist or you're a communist. And the difference was very stark. If you said that someone's a communist, you automatically understand how that's different than capitalism. you know, but right now we don't really have an understanding of how this particular ideology is any different than your traditional leftist liberalism.
Yeah,
and I think,
but we saw kind of like how the like how the Red Scare went with McCarthyism, right? Like, how much of a communist can you be? Could you be like, man, I'd like to live in a hippie commune? Does it make you a communist? Well, in what sense? Like, again, that the label could be used, and you can kind of see a right-wing ideologic intolerance, and I think that's what we did see during McCarthyism. Right now, we're seeing like an ideological intolerance from the left. So maybe that's your word, just like ideological intolerance.
And it's important because we are talking about gray areas, and we're not all on the same page here. And this is the important thing, is that the, not whatever you call them, the enlightened, you know, tend to be able to discuss
the anti-intellectuals.
Exactly.
No. Well, no. Well, they're whatever. Fucking labels.
I know.
They tend to be able to discuss ideas. Doesn't matter if they like them or not. I mean, you've heard the numerous people who've hopefully people have heard the debates that Richard Spencer has had with I don't know, a non-SJW, and they are cordial to him, but they challenge his ideas, and they're not complete dicks about it. So his ideas 100% need to be challenged, but just in a respectful way. And so that's how you root out the bad ideas. You don't just ignore them.
Yep, that's ultimately what MythCon is, becomes, and offers to the world, because I think that's exactly what we need.
Yeah. And yeah, that is so. If
I don't know what happened to our audio.
Yeah,
the
our
last
audio
30 seconds, but
we have a ghost.
But maybe that's a good time to deconstruct. No, shout out to Jeremy. I saw your or the Quartering, who made a douchebag comment about us, and then I'm kidding, man. So thank you for being in the chat, and thank you everyone else for contributing to the conversation. Travis, absolute pleasure having you on.
I'm sorry, did my last comment not go through?
No, I didn't hear it at all.
You can fire it out.
It was awesome. I basically said, like, so everything that Dimitri just said, I think is a perfect. I think that's a great place to end it, because that's exactly, I think, what we need. I think that's what MythCon is, and I hope that's what MythCon does.
Oh, anytime you want to give me a compliment, that's totally cool.
There you go. Gonna blow smoke right up your ass, Dimitri.
That's right. Or a critique. And again, like, critiques that are given in a way that do promote like understanding. Like, man, I just want to see where you're coming from. I don't agree. Like that's how you get progress. Like, you know, and I think that's what you want. And yeah, like, so you're a perfect candidate. You share the spirit of MythCon, where we hope to see you.
So again, September, if you want to make it out, next time I'll bend over for the compliments, and by all means. No, it was fantastic, Travis. Thank you so much.
No, I love what you guys are doing. Please keep it up. You guys are heroes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.